Hey everybody, Benny Korea from Operation Rainfall here, and welcome to the finale of Mary Skelter Nightmares. Now, many of you are probably wondering, wait a second, you just finished Chapter 3, why are you saying this is the finale when there's obviously more game to go? I mean, you barely scratched the surface here. Well, as I kind of explained when we started this project, before the game had launched, we were given this opportunity by IFI to go ahead and basically, show the game off to you guys. And they just asked, basically, we not go past Chapter 3. And so that's basically why. I'll go into a little bit more about that, but basically, first things first, I do want to let you know this episode is going to be a little bit different. This is definitely going to be a lot more informative, and probably a lot less funny in that kind of aspect. Granted, if you found my humor funny, then, hooray. But, as we're going to be recapping kind of the game as a whole. Oops, I didn't want that to do that. Recapping the game as a whole, as well as I'm going to be giving kind of my opinion about what I've seen so far. I do need to go ahead and just give a general disclaimer that basically these opinions are mine and mine alone. They're not off Rainfalls as a whole, and this is not a review of the game. This is basically an impression. If you get to argue, it's an impression space. And that's kind of what the idea of this whole thing was. So, that being said, let's go ahead. I'm going to jump into the bonus menu here just so that way this stops. Cycling through. And I'll talk about the first thing real fast. So, basically, why we're stopping at Chapter 3, the game's out, some of you are probably going, well, we should go further and whatnot. But the idea behind this was to go ahead and give you guys, show off the game so you guys can make an informed decision on whether or not it's for you. And if you got stuck in the first parts of the game, hey, you can use this as a guide too. I'm fine with that. Keep in mind, we started doing this playthrough when the game wasn't even released yet, which is a really big opportunity, and I'm very grateful for that we could go ahead and do this. But at the same time, there has to be a reason for people to pick up the game, and if we give away all the secrets and whatnot, that's not really fair. I do understand that aspect, and I understand why, all game companies are very, worried about that. If you like, I would say is if you, one, obviously take a look at reviews. Reviews have been coming out for the game, and, you always want an informed opinion, a secondary opinion to go along with something like this, especially because I have not beat the game, obviously. But also encourage your favorite streamer or Let's Player to pick up the game. That gets the word out there and gets tells more people about the game and shows, how interesting and how cool it can be. So that would be my best suggestion for you. But really, at the end of the day, if you really do like this game and find it interesting, please make sure to buy a copy. It does not have to be through the links down below. It doesn't. You just go to GameStop even if you want. Do however you want to do it. But the goal of this was to basically give you guys a look at the game, so like I said, you can make an informed decision. And I hope I've certainly done that here. That all being said, we're gonna go ahead and step away from all of that and go ahead and talk a little bit about the bonus thing here. So the bonus, as mentioned, as I think we mentioned way back in one of the earlier parts, the bonus menu has the novel, the gallery, music, characters, and heroine memoirs. Now, we actually haven't been in this menu yet, but we knew about the novel just because of the fact we've been finding a couple of pieces here and there. We're not going to showcase any of the novel because it's really spoilery stuff. I will just take a peek in there and see if there's anything interface-wise to kind of show off. Galleries, probably for CGs. Music's kind of obvious. Character, I'm probably assuming character art. The hero and memoirs, I'm guessing, are probably from the events we get through the raising their affection, whatnot, etc. But that would all be here. And, yeah, this is parts of the novel. So we have 17 parts unlocked right now. Looks to be about halfway or so. But this is one of the cool things about Mary Skelter Nightmares, that the aspect is that they basically, this was in here. And so it gives you a lot of it's going to give you a lot of backstory for the world and whatnot. Probably want to wait till after you beat the game to maybe read this, though. That's the reason I'm not jumping into this, because I don't want to be spoiled yet. I'm still going to play the game on my own and try and figure out, because I have my own theories as to how, what exactly is going on with this plot. But it's here for when you finish it, so make sure to take a look at that. So next, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the game, and we're going to show off Cinderella really quickly, and then we're going to start at that point doing a little, just basically going through the game, and I'll be giving my impressions on things. So I'll see you in a few. Okay, so we're in the temple area now, and I'm going to show off the 12 dash real fast. So the 12 dash is a pretty simple mechanic. Basically, just when you activate it,
I'll use my power.
you can move very quickly. So it makes kind of running through the dungeons and backtracking a little bit easier, though you've got to be careful because you can actually run into a wall and you're kind of stunned for a couple of seconds. But like I said, pretty simple ability. I'm pretty sure it probably comes more into play with some of the later traps in which they'll activate very quickly. So you probably have to go ahead and use that to get past certain areas, much like the bamboo guard. In fact, it probably might be a little bit easier to get through than using the bamboo guard. But you can just keep recasting the bamboo guard, so maybe it's collapsing floors? I don't know. But it's there if we need it. So now I'm going to go ahead and run to a couple of fights here. Give me a moment. Well, originally I was going to show off Cinderella in battle, but then I kind of, one, I forgot to set up skills, but two, really, it's just, she's a really strong physical attacker. I'll probably insert a clip here of her punching something for like 400 plus damage, which was impressive, but still, it took a few minutes to go ahead and actually get through the fight. Like, I forgot to set her up. I'm a genius. Then again, with doing 424 damage with one attack, she pretty much hits like a tank. So, but yeah, she's basically a strength-based character. Probably a good replacement for Red Riding Hood if you want to alternate those two, much like I'm kind of doing with Sleepy and Kaguya. But, so that being said, at this point, let's kind of grow into the impressions and my feelings about the game as a whole. Now, for those of you who have never read any of my reviews, and I've said before they can be a bit wordy, I tend to basically structure them as well as kind of like my feedback as to what can be improved. That doesn't mean that the game is bad or these things in and of themselves are wrong. It's just I always kind of work by the mentality of things can always be better. And that's all. It's the same way I'm going to approach this. Keep in mind, I've barely scratched the surface of this game. I've probably poured about, we're at episode 13, with some grinding here, there, whatnot, etc., and some overruns. I've probably poured about 15 to 18 hours into this thing. And we've just scratched the surface. So keep that in mind. So these are not going to be the be-all, end-all, and they're not going to be definitive. But at that point, you can also draw some basic conclusions about things. So let's go ahead and start with the basic premise of the game. And so that basically is that, you know, you basically have this thing, jail, which we're stuck in. It's some kind of living organism that just kind of appeared and popped up. And that starts up a great mystery. What is this thing? Why is it alive? Why these people? Why are they stuck here? And they've been stuck here a long time, to the point where people have forgotten their last names, for example. The story begins, of course, with Alice and Jack in the city streets, right over here. And they, they're being tortured every single day. Alice is forced to lick blood from the walls, for example. It's very squeaky and kind of creepy in that aspect. And you open up this mystery where, for some reason, when she seems like she's about to go crazy, she'll lick some of Jack's blood and be able to calm down. And, of course, we later find out that, Jack's blood has this ability to prevent Blood Skelter, and we'll kind of go into that in a minute. But, once again, you see the world that Jack and Alice are living in, and it's a bad, they're in a bad situation. You empathize for them. It does give you a good connection with the characters in that aspect. But when you really kind of drill down to the premise, and this is going to sound weird, but think about it for a second. The idea of this game kind of is that you're the one guy in a group of, basically, battle warrior, female battle warriors who, when they get the blood of enemies on them, can go berserk. They can lick blood off of each other, and by getting sprayed with this dude's blood, it calms them down. I mean, it's a premise when on paper you say it outright. It's just very squeaky. It doesn't seem like it would work. And yet you basically, for watching the game and whatnot, the game presents it in a way that that it plays it completely straight, and you buy it, which is a sign of good writing and good development. So there is that aspect there, and as such, I think it does bring a very interesting idea, and it paints a very interesting world. It's one of those, I kind of think of it this way, it's one of those ideas that can only really work in Japan. A Western developer could certainly pull this off with enough care and whatnot, just I haven't seen how they would do that. But it's one of those things like you go, yep, that's something that would come out of Japan, and it's kind of one of those things I do like, because they take these kind of crazy ideas and make them work somehow. It's one of the reasons I love a lot of Japanese games. But yeah, I mean, like I said, does that mean this is for everyone? Like I said, it's a bit squicky. I can totally understand it if you just kind of take one look at that premise and just go, no, I can't do this. You know, but if you can delve into it, it's actually kind of interesting in that aspect. So from there, I think we should basically talk briefly about music and graphics. And, you know, graphically, the game, as we've seen throughout this entire thing and through, you know, even like the backgrounds here with, you know, the background CGs, whatnot, there's a lot of effort put into basically drawing things, making it all look good. There's a lot put into the character art as well. There's little details and whatnot, like basically you look at Jack here, and you look on his right hand, and you see there's the Mary gun, but then there's also the tube connecting it to the bracelet there. You know, it's how the Mary gun works, things like that. You know, Alice, you know, with her, you know, her giant sword, or then you have Red Riding Hood with her giant scissors. You know, there's a lot of effort and a lot of detail put into the characters themselves. Same with Jack and his headphones. There's a reason for that. Then you also basically have the creatures themselves, which the nightmare designs, as you can see here, are absolutely just creepy. It's just, You know, the Graveyard Nightmare, I think, was one of the creepiest ones, personally, for me. That thing is just, The Temple Nightmare was not nearly as bad. It was freaky looking, but it's a moon. It's a living kind of moon with tentacle eyes and lips. I mean, it's freaky, but you're like, huh. I don't know, you see this guy, and you're just like going, what kind of twisted mind thought this thing up? Holy jeez. And then, yeah, you start looking at basically when you break apart pieces of its armor, there's more mouths underneath, all that stuff. It's just, I mean, they're not the only ones there. I mean, you've got, wow, I didn't remember running into this thing. You know, you've got little, oh, that was probably one of the bosses, that's why. Okay. And then you've got, like, the other bosses from the marchand, you know, the other boss marchands you found. Like, there's a lot of really good detail and, you know, put into these things. So graphically, the game is actually pretty good. The battle system graphics are a little more simplistic, but that's because of the fact that you're basically kind of in first person, seeing the enemies pop up right in front of you, and then really the emphasis is on the enemy models than attacking. It's not like a Neptunia game where everything is on the field and you're basically seeing models of everyone go up against each other. It's a different style of gameplay, but for this and for being a DRPG, it fits that kind of mold perfectly, I think. So that's really good in that aspect. And music, you've been listening to the music the entire time we've been basically doing this. The music in this game is great. The battle themes are great. I don't really get tired of them, which is good because when you're doing grinding and whatnot, you don't want something that's going to grate on your nerves. Good game music really falls into two categories. It's good incidental music that doesn't distract you, or it's good music that can kind of get you through something. And I think Mary Skelter kind of falls into the second realm for that one. It's creepy where it needs to be, but then it also has kind of that hopeful, triumphant feel as well that you're going to actually try and get through this and get out of this place. So it's balanced really well. Next, we're going to talk about the map, which means I need to go into the temple. So give me a second to get there. Okay, so here we are in Temple Area 2, my sworn nemesis for this playthrough, pretty much. And I think this is a great place to kind of talk about the map design, as well as kind of dungeon design in general. So I'm going to hide the webcam here for a couple seconds so you can see the mini-map. So the mini-map, like a lot of DRPGs, has a couple of different modes. You obviously have this close-up one. You have one that definitely shows you a little bit more, and then you have this one, which is slightly transparent and shows you the entire map. And then, granted, this is really good in the aspect of you're trying to go, let's see, and basically where I'm at, how do I get over to that one area, or, you know, in relation to certain areas, where am I in the map? Though, as you've seen, if you've seen through this, oh, you can also turn off the map. I've been playing in this mode for the most part, just because of the fact that it's close up enough and it's fine, and if I really need to go ahead and go anywhere, I can use this map instead, which this gives you the full map, and you can see everything in here, as well as use this to go anywhere you really want to in the area. So it makes backtracking very seamless. You get into a fight, and it'll basically, once you're done with the fight, the game will continue moving along that path. The pathfinding algorithm itself seems to be pretty efficient. There are one or two times I kind of wonder why it went a certain way, but it works really well. That said, is it absolutely perfect? No, there are a couple of things that I think in a sequel could be improved. First of all is basically, whoops, wrong button. As usual, I still can't remember what button is what. First of all, if you kind of, why these maps are absolutely huge and there's a lot of detail put into it, one of the biggest problems I had was, let's see here, where are you? Oh wait, no, it wasn't Dungeon, it wasn't Temple 2, it was Temple 1 that was my bit, that was my nemesis. I can still probably show this here, so... Nope, actually I can't. Let me run over the Temple 1. I am smart. There we go, Temple 1, my real nemesis. So, if you remember back during the first couple episodes of Temple, this door confused the heck out of me. Because we had gone through the door, we saw there was a yellow marker here, but the whole marker wasn't actually there. So, and I think this was basically more of an issue with just maybe because it was a horizontal marker. Basically, because it was horizontal instead of vertical, it displays a little bit differently on the map. But especially when you get to kind of this size, having those doors be a little bit brighter, I think, could help a little bit. Otherwise, the other thing too I'll note is that there's no way to notate the map. Which is something that a lot of DRPGs will let you do. They'll let you drop something like an icon or whatnot to remember, hey, I need to go back to here. Because when you get to these 60 by 60 maps, you can forget what you were doing or maybe where you need to go something or where a particular drop is. So having a way to notate the map, I think, could really go ahead and help in the future. That said, there is still a lot of interactivity. There are icons here which do show up, and they do basically tell you a lot of different things, such as where, scripted enemy encounters are, where traps are. It does tell you where your rabbit hole is, though, like I said, on this size of the screen, it's a little harder to see, but that's because it's a 60 by 60 grid. You can always zoom in and go, all right, where was that? There's something over here, which does help. False walls are the other one that's really hard to kind of see on this unless you really zoom in, so... It's kind of one of those things. I understand they don't want to make it too easy, but a little more convenient for the player, I think, would certainly help in that aspect. That all said, the other cool thing about basically traversing the dungeons, though, are the Blood Maiden abilities. And like a rabbit hole, rabbit hole is incredibly useful. Having a portable save point as well as transfer out, on one hand, may make the game easy to sub. On the other, because of how crazy this game can sometimes get, it's really useful to have that, especially if you're moving into an unfamiliar area. You now have the opportunity to save, try something, and not lose a lot of progress, which can be very frustrating in a DRPG because of the fact that if you only have limited save points, and you've mapped out a really good big portion of a dungeon and then suddenly die because you walk into a trap or just got unlucky in a couple of fights, well, you gotta redo all that work again, and that's not fun. So I really do like that aspect. Granted, it's probably, I assume we're going to probably lose Alice or have the ability blocked at some point later on. And it actually does happen, especially when you run into the nightmares. The Bloody Nipper is kind of is a pretty simple ability, but it is useful. Cut down some basic walls. You can also basically, the exposed portions of the jail's flesh, you can cut those and get some cool items. Sorry, that's right. Button's right by that stick. The Poison Bomb is it's useful. But you can hurt yourself like I've done before, so be careful when using that, definitely. But it's a cool little ability. It'd be kind of nice maybe if you could set that, I don't know, maybe if you can set that off by enemies. But in the future, if they basically had a way like you could set that off, maybe enemies in the area or random encounters in the area would end up showing up poisoned or something like that. Be kind of a neat idea, maybe. Rose Arrow, kind of the same thing, because you shoot at it, it's use it basically in an offensive capacity. And keep in mind, that could entirely still be true. We really haven't done a lot of testing with that aspect. But if not, something like that would be kind of neat. But using it to basically hit faraway switches and whatnot, and especially the puzzles, will basically shooting an arrow and having it need to go through certain pillars and fire to basically go ahead and take care of something. That's kind of a really neat idea, and it's nice to see that they put those puzzle aspects into the dungeon to give you something more to do than just wander around. Tiny Princess we really didn't play around with, but at the same time, other than shrinking regular consumable items, I'm not all that sure what you would do with it other than possibly later on, or maybe if there's certain large, you know, weapons you can shrink down, might make sense. But I gotta admit, I'm a little confused with this one. But to be fair, I also haven't played around with it a lot, so there is that. The bamboo guard is indispensable. I love this thing for basically wandering through traps, and I wish I had it during the graveyard section and that poison field. But, you know, what you do have, it's great. You can constantly cast it. It's not a big problem. You know, it's not a big drain on your resources. The 12 dash will be interesting, I think, to use as time goes on, especially for quicker exploration for a dungeon and backtracking. But at the same time, you also have the auto movement feature on the map, so kind of negates it a little bit of that in that aspect. The Mary gun itself, we really haven't seen much use for on the field. At least I haven't. So I'm assuming it'll probably come in handy later, especially because it just says Mary gun level 1. So I'm assuming there's got to be other upgrades to it, whatnot, etc. But that'll happen probably as the story goes on. The last thing in regards to the map I want to kind of talk about real fast is just the design, and I want you to kind of take a look at this. And like I said, just kind of look how complex these dungeons are. And like I said, this is Temple. This is their, you know, this is a 60 by 60 map. It's pretty big, but there's a lot of complexity there. You know, and it is, you really do have that sense of accomplishment when you finish. When you finish really mapping out a floor, you're just like, oh yes, I completed it. I feel, you know, I did something, and it feels good. The maps are probably going to get, I'm assuming, are going to get a little bit larger still. So unless they do stay 60 by 60, which that actually is not a bad size, so I could go with that. But they might get larger. I can see them going maybe 75 by 75 because they keep going up by 15 every single time. But honestly, kudos to the dungeon designers, because you can tell there's a lot of intricacies here. I really just imagine them sitting there with graph paper, just trying to draw everything out and be like, you know, well, should we make this into the dead end? How about this? Or like that area in that section in Area 3, where last episode we thought that was one giant room and it was 4 separate rooms. That was really kind of cool, because I tricked myself into thinking, oh, it's just one giant room. No, it's 4 interconnected rooms. But I only figured that out. I thought it was one giant room because I only mapped out the edges. So you really do have to explore these dungeons in detail to really find all the nooks and crannies and all the other stuff. That said, there are a couple of things. There's one other thing in particular with dungeon exploration that I do find a little doubly confusing, but doesn't quite work for me. And I'm going to get into a couple of battles to go ahead and show that off. So give me a feel.
Here I go.
Okay, well, not quite to where I wanted to show off, but how's this for something interesting? We're about to have all 5 of the girls go basically into massacre mode. I had to think of what term I was thinking of. Dear Lord. So this will be kind of interesting. Let's see. Considering this is the first time this has happened, let's see how this goes. Wow, Kage actually just went ahead and took her out.
Goodness.
The sensation. I'll beat you silly.
Yeah, we never actually ran into a situation where all 5 basically went massacre at once. All right, that being said,
That's over.
I gotta finish. I'm basically in the murder hallway, trying to get the hunger meter filled. So back in a minute. Okay, so hunger bonus has basically gone off, and so now we bring up the jail bonus roulette. And this is where I'm going to start talking about the battle system in and of itself. So, as you can kind of see, like I said, it's a roulette, and I'll open with this kind of aspect that for talking about this. It's a little bit gimmicky. Now, let me go ahead and stop this so it's not pinging every 3 seconds. And I'll deal with you in a minute, you mouth. So, first of all, the jail has 3 basic needs, which you can see from the top of the screen right there. You know, hunger, libido, and sleep. And they're 3 very basic needs, and yes, they certainly need to be filled. And when you do so, you know, the jail does react, and you get that, you know, that bonus, either the hunger bonus, the libido bonus, or the sleep bonus, with certain ones doing certain things. Libido bonus in particular seems to be necessary for unlocking certain aspects of the dungeon, which I'm totally on board with the idea of needing to do things to unlock additional parts of the dungeon. My kind of issue with this is that it's a little too gimmicky because of the roulette system. Granted, you can learn to time it, as I've gotten pretty good at timing this thing, but if this age of achievements and trophies have kind of taught us anything, it's that gamers really do enjoy kind of goal-based gameplay, you know, having something that basically a goal we can strive towards. When something's left up to chance, it just doesn't quite sit as well within that kind of aspect. So I would say definitely this works. This works perfectly fine for this game, especially because it's the first one. But if they did a sequel to Mary Skelter, what I would like to see is see that system change into basically something progressive-based. You know, basically like, kind of like an experience. The jail has levels of hunger and libido and sleep, and by doing certain things, you can increase those, you know, those levels. And when you reach certain levels, you unlock certain things. Heck, in fact, you can make it part of the story. Maybe the goal is you don't want to level up the jail too much because you could trap yourself in there. Or maybe that's just it. Maybe the jail, we don't realize it, is something that's protecting us, and we need to keep, you know, we need to strengthen it. You know, it opens you up in a way to not only have the system there, but also then have the player have more of a hand in it without leaving us the chance. But you can integrate it into the narrative then more tightly. So I would say that would be one thing I would certainly change if there is a sequel to this. And considering how hard they're pushing it, I would like to see IFI pick up another series as a sequel. Yes, we have Neptunia and we have Hakuoki here, but having another series under the franchise under their belt. Oh, of course we have I forget what the official name of the series is, but basically the series of games that are basically Moe Chronicle and Monster Monpiece and Moe Chronicle, you know. But yeah, there is that, and that's starting to make its strides here. But another franchise under their belt couldn't hurt them. So something akin to Mary Skelter again, I'm totally down for it. But yeah, that'd be one thing I would certainly change. As for the battle system as a whole, really, it's a pretty tight battle system. I will say IFI certainly has this thing with a lot of their games. This goes back to Omega Quintet, if I remember correctly, and maybe even before then. I haven't played Fairy Fencer, so maybe not as much there, but definitely I remember Omega Quintet, where you have the one guy with a bunch of girls, and the guy basically only has a couple of, you know, the fighting is left to the females, you know, which is great. But the guy doesn't really do all that much then. It's like, that does kind of bug me a little bit, just because of the fact you have this character who kind of doesn't do a lot, it feels like. In this game, though, it kind of does work, because Jack is such an integral part of the battle system. You kind of don't want him to be... Or it's not that you don't want him. You don't have the time for him to partake in the battle. And I will say this, at least they also integrate it to the narrative, where he does feel inadequate because he can't wield one of the blood weapons. And they give you a reason why he can't, too, which is really kind of cool. But basically his job on the battlefield is to basically purge the maidens to make sure they don't go into Blood Skelter mode and bring them back, as well as to use items. Though I will say that is one thing I do not like in particular, is he's the only one who can use items, which I don't quite understand as much. Like I said, I made that joke basically before. He's running around the battlefield cramming food in their mouths. It's like, here, eat, recover health. Or throwing water at them or something. It's a bit of a silly image. It's like, items are kind of one of those basic needs in an RPG that I kind of think anyone should be able to use them. But that's one of the things, I guess, that makes Jack unique in this case. As for the actual Blood Maidens themselves, you obviously can... There's a lot of good customization you can do here in the aspect of you can basically set up their skills anywhere you want based on the classes you unlock, and then you also have a lot of flexibility in battle. You only have limited slots, which we never ran into that limit, but you can increase that. But you also, of course, have another way, for example, if Jack is knocked out, and I only realized this last episode, you can use the lick command to basically go ahead and lick the blood off of one of the other blood maidens, and it'll give you you know, a particular effect. So Cinderella, for example, gives us Helia level 2. So if she's, you know, if she has high corruption, and I don't want her going into mass, I don't want to risk the chance of her going into Blood Skelter mode, I can lick her, and at the same time that can prevent that temporarily. Or if I'm in dire straits, I can do that and basically weaken magic to the party, I can heal the party, I can restore a large amount of HP to that one character, or, you know, recover a fair amount of SP. So it does give you some actual interesting options in that aspect, as well as another way to manage your corruption level. Which, speaking of, the idea of basically the blood covering them and whatnot based on the meter is a really kind of interesting idea, because it's a risk and reward then. You know, you can, I will say, more often than not, the system's pretty fair. There were 1 or 2 times where it's like, I went to Blood Skelter I was like, wait, my corruption's fine. Why am I going to Blood Skelter? It's pretty rare, but if it happens, you can have a really bad day in that aspect. But it does keep you on your toes. You do have Jack around to kind of go ahead and help, though, you know, he'll be knocked out probably from the amount of blood loss. But the Massacre mode is an interesting idea in the fact that, yeah, the game encourages you to play and exploit enemy weaknesses. A lot of RPGs, and especially the way you probably see me play, I kind of just level up characters and just punch things until they die. This game, you can do that in, but it works a lot better if you focus on enemy weaknesses and overkilling, so that you can basically go ahead and, you know, you get the blood splatters and blood crystals, which you need to upgrade your weapons, as well as to go ahead and unlock other things. So the game, like a lot of good Japanese games, the game expects you to learn its rules and then learn how to break them, essentially. And during the first part of the game, you could basically just play, you know, you could just play around with it and, you know, you'll be fine. But towards the last half of the game, a lot of these games expect you to really get good with those systems and understand them inside and out. And Mary Skelter kind of has that feel to me, where towards the end of the game, I'm really going to have to learn how to exploit weaknesses. That's why during the Nightmare fights, I was really looking for weaknesses, because those bosses are really tough. And the more times I can exploit weakness, the better. Though it doesn't always work to my advantage, obviously. The only other thing in regards to the battle system is the class system. And I have a little bit of slightly mixed feelings on this. The idea of it is really kind of cool. Every character has different classes, which makes a lot of sense. The big kind of issue I kind of have with this was that it's not until about Chapter 3, unless you really start going out there and grinding, and I did some pretty serious grinding, that you don't have really access to the class change system. To be fair, you do have the Sakura Maiden DLC, which came out when the game released, but I'm also going to point out that's not part of the base game. So as such, if you didn't download that, you don't have access possibly until the class change system until, well, Chapter 3. And if you kind of play like I do, you're already well into developing one particular class. You don't necessarily want to have to switch over to another one. You're not going to be willing to switch over to another one and learn the skills in that when you're already halfway through developing one class. So I think if it was introduced in Chapter 2 or a little bit sooner, you might encourage the players to play around with it a little bit more. But at the same time, this is also based on my personal playstyle. For a lot of people, they're going to see it, they're going to instantly jump in there and start fiddling around with stuff and trying to figure out what kind of works for them. Me, I'm more of, like I said from the start of this, kind of pick one particular set of skills, master them, then move on to the next. And it served me well through here. But, like I said, that's my personal playstyle as opposed to everyone else's, so I can definitely be wrong on this one. But, as a whole, the battle system is really kind of good. There's a lot of good ingenuity here, and there's a lot of good strategy, which brings us to our next topic, the Nightmares. And that means I gotta go load up an earlier save, so I'll be back in a few. Okay, so I loaded up Chapter 2 here, and I'm basically running away from the Nightmare at the moment. It's basically the Nightmare fight. Now, the reason I kind of chose this is because it was the easiest to get to, but we can talk about the Nightmare system real quick here. First of all, during these sections here, the idea of actually running away from the Nightmare in real time is a really neat idea, because of the aspect that it really does kind of keep you on your ouch toes, and you're freaking out because this, you know, unstoppable thing is chasing you. It is terrifying in that aspect. And as you look at basically at the top there, because of the fact it does occur in real time, you've got to be careful with, you know, how if you don't stay out of its way, you could be in a lot of trouble. Now, on the good side, you actually can... No, go away. I'm not done talking. You can actually, if you get stuck like we did during Chapter 2, you can face the nightmare, and as long as you could break one of the pieces of its armor, I keep running into those. You can stun it and get by. So it's not an unwinnable situation if you get into a fight with it. Okay, looks like he got me. Oh no, we got a book battle. So then you have these issues like with the book battles where, you know, you're running around, basically you're stuck in this fight, and this thing is still chasing you, and it's on your butt. Like I said, it makes for a very frantic atmosphere, very tense. You have a lot of anxiety, and I understand what the developers are going for in that aspect, and I think they succeeded. The especially with the darkening and whatnot, gives you a very dreadful atmosphere, and you just know you're in a lot of trouble. Except there's one big problem, which I noted in the last video, and it's like, as you note here, we basically have access to an item menu here, so we're basically everything's all hunky-dory. Well, let me get out of this fight, and we'll talk a little bit about, I don't care that I wasted that, it's an old save. And we'll talk a little bit about, ouch. Is it Wax Thumbelina? And we'll talk a little bit about the one kind of feeling I have with the Nightmare system, so just a second. Okay, so I'm out of the fight, and as you can kind of see, the party's not in the greatest of shape, but you have no access to your menu. Now, the mini-map I understand not having access to because of the fact that the idea is that it's dark and you're kind of got to figure your way around. And you can use the blood trails to actually help you with that, which is a really cool idea. But not being able to access the menu kind of turns this sometimes into a luck-based mission. Because if you get if you get stuck in a couple of book battles, there's not a lot you can do then. Yeah, I'm just going to basically get into a fight with this guy to stop him from chasing me around. As such, I think there really should have been a way to access that menu. It's the one complaint I kind of have with the Nightmare system, is that because you can't do that, you have to get into some fight. So like with last episode, we're scaling the tower. If we just immediately get into a fight from stage 1 and I lose somebody because just some bad luck, I have to get into another fight to try and revive them. Especially because at the top portion of the screen we have, you can see, everyone's turn order. There should be some way, I would think, to access the item menu. Kind of like I'll say it's like the Final Fantasy VI, if we go back all the way there, you had the active time battle system where time passed still even in the menus. So having time pass in the menus, I think, is still entirely possible. So not quite sure why, if there was a technical limitation in this aspect, but definitely for a sequel, that would be one thing I think needs to be improved. It's really my only major complaint with that. As for the Nightmare fights themselves, the Nightmare fights, like I said, are a lot of fun. They're very frantic and hectic because you have these super powerful bosses that are basically coming after you. And as you can see, even with proper preparation, they can really put the hurt on you. Trying to remember. And then the other cool thing is that unlike a lot of other, bosses, you have different parts to them. So in this case, the leggings, the apron, or the hammer. And every part has a different weakness. Until I can't remember what any of them are at the moment.
Here I go.
So it does require a lot of different strategies. Nope, but that broke it, so that works. And then, like I said, if you break one of the parts, you can escape out of the fight. And yeah, I didn't set up Thumbelina on purpose. And Jack fell down. Yep, I do not remember at all what his weaknesses were. I feel I might not even have it right now.
Leave it to me.
Oh yeah, there go the leggings.
Here I go.
And there goes that. Like I said, you can see how creepy that thing actually is. Now you can actually see, the mouths and whatnot. It's just like, somebody had a field day with teeth do not belong in certain areas, people. And somebody had a field day creating this thing. But as you can see, that gives the, it does make the Nightmare fights rather interesting in the aspect of it's like they're multi-stage, and then once you basically break all the parts off the Nightmare, you're still not done. This thing is like, oh, so you really want to throw down? All right, well, let's throw down. And then it really starts coming after you. And these fights, even if there are not multiple parts, they can turn out to be very difficult.
Yikes! Here I go.
Especially when they get to go multiple times. But that is neither here nor there. Alright, so now I'm going to jump out of this, and I'm going to jump into one more fight, and then we'll start wrapping some, or start basically we'll be done with the battle system. So give me just a second. Okay, so we're basically at chapter 3 during this little fight here, with the giant nightmare, and this is the other type of nightmare fight, and it's actually really kind of interesting in this aspect. You're seeing a mixing of a couple of different game styles here. One being basically Trillion, which uses a similar idea in the aspect of there'll be a glowing point on the floor, and you basically have to stay out of that to avoid getting hit by an attack. So, I mean, there is that aspect to it, which is kind of neat in that, which is certainly kind of neat, and it does give a little more real-time strategy. Whoops. Oh, they turned off. I took too long. That is not what I want to do. I don't know why I did that. Oh, God. I'm just going to go to the second floor. How about that? Talking and trying to do this at the same time is probably not the best idea. But it brings more of a real-time strategy aspect into it. I'm going to test a theory while I'm here. Yes, I can. Aha. Can I not attack the thing from here? Oh, great. Book battle. Back in a second.
Stay focused.
Okay. If I would have gotten here sooner, it probably made a little more sense. But...
I suppose I can do this.
But it would have actually, oh dear lord, that thing is actually moving its turn up in real time. It's kind of interesting. I would have still been stunned when I got here, and it would have been a little bit easier to do damage to it. Now it's just going to basically beat the ever-loving heck out of me. But the larger nightmares like this do, because of the fact that you have to you have to move to different areas of the floor of the tower. I think it adds an extra element of strategy to things, and it's very interesting in that aspect. I'm kind of curious to see what they do with it later in the game, especially because you can have, obviously there's only 4 floors, but I can imagine it's getting a lot bigger, whatnot, etc. So it is interesting in that aspect, and it shows they actually put a lot of thought into creating these bosses that were larger than life, and that you had to basically really, they're titans in their own way. So that is something I think that is actually really kind of cool, and it's unique to this game. One final thing about the battle system I will point out is the encounter rate. The encounter rate is actually okay. The problem is that if you're trying to grind, it takes a while to sometimes run into a fight. What I would suggest definitely for a sequel would be, especially for a person like me who likes to grind and likes to level up characters, and maybe we get this ability later on in the game, but having it available earlier on might help too, especially with some of the earlier grinding, would be if there was an ability to basically summon monsters. To use an example, Criminal Girls with Yoko, I believe, no, was it Yoko? I forget who it was. One of the characters, actually, hold on a second. I actually have the character book here sitting on my desk. Sako. Sako basically had an ability that, that allowed her to instantly summon an enemy. So you basically instantly do a fight, and it was a great way to grind. I loved it. In fact, I used it really to make sure I was ready for every single boss in the game. And something like that, especially when you have these really difficult fights and you want to grind, would be a little bit easier. Because I think, like I said, for exploring the dungeons, you do not want the encounter rate to be too high, because it makes things difficult. I know we have the scripted encounters on the field, but sometimes it's just, they're so far apart that it doesn't necessarily behoove you to run from this one to that one to this one to that one. So that would be something I would definitely suggest in that, for a future game. All right, let me get out of this, and then we're gonna go back to the Liberated District, and we'll start wrapping this up. Okay, so back here in the Liberated District. So let's talk a little bit in general about the story. We're not going to go into real spoilers or anything at this point, in case you're just picking this episode up to kind of watch the basically get my impressions on things. But so the general story in the aspect is that you're trying to escape from jail. You don't know why you're stuck on this thing. You just know, sadly, Jack and Alice are stuck here. people have survived in this place because they even said their village and whatnot. They had a village, they were part of it, and then they got captured and they got tortured. Or basically got put in prison and are being tortured by the Martians. We don't know why the Martians are doing this. We don't know why Jail is doing this. We don't know where it came from. But these were all really good. The game sets up a lot of questions early on. And then you have this area where where Red Riding Hood shows up, saves them, and takes them to the Liberated District, where somehow there is a thriving city. Why isn't Jail just eating this place? And then you've got the tower in the background there, ominously looming. You know, like I said, there's a lot of questions here. And for an idea of that we're stuck in this thing and we don't necessarily know if the things we're doing are going to help us get out if it's impossible is really kind of a neat idea. And then you have the aspect of you don't necessarily know who you can trust because everyone has sage of suspicion about them, which does make sense. We're all kind of in this desperate situation. Everyone kind of wants to get out. Who can you really know? Who's willing to do that unspeakable thing to get themselves or the rest of humanity out of this place? What are they willing to sacrifice? You know, are the Blood Mages just built up to be one gigantic sacrifice in the end of things? Who knows? The game does, obviously, but we're not quite there yet. And, you know, I hope you'll figure that one out on your own. But it sets up a really good mystery, and it does draw you in. Like I said, we're only through the first 3 chapters, so it's still early on in the story, and the latter half of the story, you know, is really important in any title. An ending can ruin a game. I understand this all too well. Trust me on that. It's all I can say right now. But for a hint, I'll have a review up probably next week, which I was not all that happy with the ending of the game. That's all I can say. But, you know, like I said, I understand an ending can ruin a game. So definitely look at full reviews for information about that aspect of it. But for bringing you in and drawing you in, it does a great job of that. And also introduce several factions. You have the Order of the Sun, which is this, you know, kind of cult-like order, you know, that believe in the sun and whatnot, despite the fact that we can't see the sun. So you understand, it's this mythical thing that people believe, know is out there and they want to see, or they hope is out there, but we, you know, no one's seen it in years because they've been stuck in jail. And then you have basically the Dawn itself, you know. There are different factions in the Dawn. We don't quite know what's up with Haru, but at the same time, Miko seems to have her own demons in her past, and the Professor, can we really trust him? Does he really have our best interest in mind? Like I said, it raises a lot of questions. And then you have the other Blood Maidens and basically how they've grown up in here, and they've basically become living weapons, but they seem to be taking it in stride for the most part because they feel they're actually, you know, out there helping people and providing hope and whatnot. So it's really kind of, like I said, there's a lot here to draw you in. So for what I've played so far, I really liked it. So then, speaking about the characters in general, Michiru is definitely from the or the Ohime is definitely an odd duck. You know, you can tell there's more to her than we realize. The question is really, it's going to come down to, what is she hiding? Is she kind of just acting silly because she really is, or is she really no more than she's letting on? Does Hitsuka really think he's in charge? Those are questions that I'm kind of curious about, because Michiru does seem to know, to me at least, seems to know a little bit more than she's letting on. Haru himself has seen a lot, you can tell has seen his fair share of just kind of just bad things, being stuck in here as long as he has. And you kind of hope that, you know, the guy is definitely trying to look after Jack, but you also kind of have to wonder, you know, how much is he willing to tell him, or is he one of those guys that's not going to tell Jack anything because Jack needs to figure it out for himself? So he'll make his own conclusions and reach the truth, because he said, look, you came in here kind of unbiased. So there is that aspect to it. I cannot remember his assistant's name off the top of my head. I probably should go look that up. Actually, we do have the library here. I can actually probably use this. Might be a good idea to do so. I'll go back to Toa in a second. And in Clara, she has an interesting backstory in the fact that she's grown up basically, you know, she grew up trying to steal from Haru, and Haru was just like, nope, you're not doing that, but eventually gave her, you know, a job, you know, manning the shop, whatnot. So there is kind of a relationship there of trust, and it's kind of, you hope Clara gets out of here alive. I'll say that much. I'm really kind of hoping for that aspect. Toa is one that I don't have a great feeling about. Not that he's a bad character, but the aspect of, like, I don't trust him at all. I don't know why still. But he's one of those guys that you kind of, you know, is like just kind of how prim and proper and whatnot he is. He reminds me a lot of Hitsuka. So, in certain ways. So, like, they're kind of mirror, to a degree, they might even be mirror images of each other, but I don't know. This dude, I think he knows more than he lets on. Miku, I keep doing that. Miko is an interesting character, being, of course, a scientist and having taken on her mentor's last name. You can tell she very much does not like the Dawn, and she's, and in that aspect, being a scientist, she wants to go ahead and have actual facts decide things. The thing you have to, like, much like with the professor, you have to wonder, how is she really, does she truly have our best interests in mind, or does she have her, you know, her own thing? Because the problem is, there are some times where it seems like her and the professor are not communicating. And you gotta kind of wonder in that aspect, is it because she's keeping things for him, or he's keeping things from her? We don't know yet. So, there's a lot of mystery there. The professor is the biggest enigma of all, and the one I suspect personally to not have our best interests in mind. But he is definitely a father figure, and he's very wise, having survived that encounter 15 years ago. So, you know, there's still some room for growth there. I could be totally wrong, and this guy could be totally on the up and up, but we don't know yet. And that's kind of one of the good things about this game, is that it does keep you kind of invested in wondering what's going to happen. Let's take a look. Oh, we have actually read Thumbelina's profile. Let's take a look over from here and go up. So first, let's start with Kaguya. So, an amazingly lazy girl known for always cruising on her special ride, Bamboo 1. She seems to have some secrets up her sleeve, which are used to help her general laziness. Kaguya is an interesting character, in the aspect that she has a tragic backstory, as we've seen through Chapter 3, and she just doesn't feel that, really, humanity is worth saving, kind of, at this aspect. But those around her who are loyal, you know, her friends who she'll be loyal to, she's willing to go ahead and kind of stick her neck out to them to a degree. She doesn't really trust people, you can tell, but then again, she has a good reason not to. I think over time, she'll have to probably open her heart up, which will be interesting. Cinderella. So a girl with a holier-than-thou attitude, which she uses to mask her very modest nature. She has a quirk of wanting to keep things sparkling clean. She often dwells on what she did, even to the point of self-loathing, which we haven't actually seen all that much as of yet, because we just got to her. But, I will say this, I do actually like her design quite a bit. The apron is a nice touch, but then you also have this, like, looking at, you know, that giant boot right there. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, like I said, she's a close combat specialist. Plus, she's also basically kind of the speedster of the group with the ability to run very quickly from her blood soul ability. I'm actually really interested to kind of see how her story unfolds. So, yeah, that's kind of all the thoughts we have on her. Oh, we probably should show this off. So, Kaguya Normal, Kaguya Massacre, Kaguya Blood Skelter, which is very creepy, and Bamboo 1 transforms. Oh, Lord. And you have, okay, we got that. So you have Normal, Massacre, and Blood Skelter. Her foot's on fire. Wow. That is kind of cool. Alright. And we have Sleeping Beauty, which, granted, she's known for, yep. But it is kind of adorable in the aspect, too, that, you know, she kind of is always tired. You just kind of always want to protect her in that aspect. The head nods, always looks tired and sleepy. She's very simple, but it also makes when she says things very effective. But she's one hell of a combatant, as we've seen. She's carried the party through quite a lot of this until we basically got Kaguya up to speed. So I really do like Sleeping Beauty. She's probably one of my favorite characters. Snow White is interesting. The fact that she doesn't like mirrors does work a lot in the aspect of playing to her actual character, Snow White, the actual character Snow White, and the magic mirror and whatnot, etc. Kind of interesting how she considers herself very plain and not remarkable when she obviously has to be pretty intelligent to use to create the poison bombs, as well as basically a lot of her jobs rely along intelligence and basically smart. So that's kind of interesting, that aspect. As for actual design, I still love that apple beret. That's such a cool touch. And then in the massacre mode, how it's peeled in that's just really cool. I like that. Thumbelina, which is the other one we haven't read. So, a young girl often found scolding or pushing Jack around despite his best effort. Her dislike towards showing her true self often makes her act a bit fidgety in front of others, especially Jack. And so she's more of the, you can tell that there's probably a little bit of a self-confidence issue possibly there, but she definitely has something to prove. And, you know, she's basically our classic kind of tsundere, which I'm not usually a fan of tsunderes, though. Thumbelina's okay. Especially in this kind of environment, I can really believe that being more of a self-defense mechanism and it coming into play. A lot of times the tsundere is played kind of in that aspect where it's like, oh, what's a self-defense mechanism? Yeah, but against what? And in this hostile environment, I can understand throwing up some walls. So, but I like Thumbelina. And I'll say this, she's very snarky, which kind of helps. Red Riding Hood, I love those giant scissors. It reminds me a lot of... I keep wanting to basically, you know, just insert equip somewhere of Toko, you know, from Danganronpa going, my beautiful scissors! But, you know, Red Riding Hood is a good leader. She cares about everyone else. She tries to look after the others. Though, trying to forget about Cinderella was kind of a jerk move, Red. What the hell? But, as an overall character leader, being the first one we meet, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of being the other, you could argue, main heroine. Though, really, it is Alice who's the main heroine. But yeah, an older sister, totally buy that. And of course we have Alice, who is the main heroine, Jack's good friend, and who's growing up with. Alice, we don't really know a ton of, but she really is truly Jack's confidant. They're the ones who they can tell each other anything, and as such, their relationship is probably the strongest. Which would lead me to suspect she's going to get broken the hardest as things go on and truths are revealed. That'd be my guess, at least, is where they're going with it. But you can definitely tell there's something peculiar about her and special about her. What that actually is, we're still not sure. But she also has one of the most useful abilities in the game, Rapid Hole, so there's always that. And then Jack, the youth with basically something to prove, wanting to actually not just sit on his ass and, you know, wait to be rescued, but wants to help out in the way he can. At first, you could argue it's possibly part for survival, because if he's not useful to the Dawn, they have no reason to keep him around. But even once they basically find out that, hey, your blood's useful, you can just sit around base all day, he's like, no, I'm gonna go out there and protect Alice and make sure we all get home alive. And he does a damn good job of that. Granted, he probably puts some, granted, he takes more punches to the face and falls down than anyone else, but, you know, there's not a lot he can really do. Because he can't, as much as the idea of, well, if the marchand are weak to his blood because of the weapons, you know, disintegrate or rust, why can't you just spray the marchand? Well, if you had to shoot every marchand with his blood, he'd probably pass out a hell of a lot faster. So it's better to use it in reserve to basically just, you know, keep the maidens in check. So that's why I kind of, like I said, with this aspect of the guy can't really do a lot in this game. He doesn't feel like a tacked-on character, like, oh, we had to have that one guy so the players can relate to, which is something I absolutely dislike in a lot of games. The idea that you can't just have, you know, you have to always have that one guy because the audience has to relate to this person. It's like, no, just give us good characters and a good story. Jack avoids that idea in my mind because of the fact there is a purpose and a point to him being here. So that's really kind of works in my mind for that aspect. So with that, I think we've actually gone through all of the characters. But as a whole, like I said, this cast is actually really quite interesting, and I do enjoy them. So that pretty much is just about all of my thoughts on the game. The last thing we're going to do is I'm going to actually we're going to test out the gift-giving system, and I'm going to do so by going to Cinderella's room. Wait, I don't think I have any... Oh, wait, maybe the collar and apron will work. Let's try that.
I gladly accept your gift.
Hooray! Let me see what this is.
Thank you so very much.
Hooray.
I gladly accept your gift.
Okay. That doesn't work. My question is... Where can I... Go to Jack's room. Affection. Oh, wow. That takes a while to actually level that up. Okay, let me go give her all of those and see if I can't get it up to 1. Give me just a second. Okay, so I gave Cinderella all of that. Let me see here. Wow. Oh, okay, no, I got up to 1 heart. Okay, good. Yay. Is there any particular event that occurs from that? There probably is, but we can't see it really because of the fact I have all these other events going on here as well. So that's a bit of a problem. But let's see here. Let me do one more thing real fast.
Can you get that for me?
I'm gonna leave if you're asking me to do that again.
Not
Have
bad.
this.
This is very good.
Hooray! We changed her interior. How much defection does that actually raise? Not a lot. So I'm assuming that there is an event somewhere for Cinderella for raising her affection. My problem is I don't know where it is, and I don't want to start going through events because of the fact that we're not supposed to really show off any story points of the story aspects at this point. But as you can see, basically giving them that at least shows off the idea of the system. Giving them gifts and whatnot will raise affection, and I'm pretty sure that ties into the ending of the story in one way or the other. As to how, that I don't know. I would assume that probably the bond you raise will probably keep them sane in the end, is where if jail tries to take them over, or they learn some horrible truth and start to kind of lose their way, their link to Jack will be their link to their humanity, would be my assumption. But as I said, but right now we're basically at the beginning of chapter 4. I have no idea. So not quite the exciting finale I had hoped in that aspect, huh? Oh well, what can you do sometimes? Well, I think that just about wraps it up for this aspect. So, what are kind of my final thoughts on Mary Skelter as a whole? Go back into here. As a whole, this is a very interesting game, and I actually do like it. I will say, I've been very busy trying to play. I guess another game for review. I technically have like 3 reviews I'm supposed to be writing right now. One of which is basically time sensitive, so I'm trying to get that out as soon as possible. And by the time it should be going up, hopefully everything goes well. This goes out on a Monday. That should be going out on Tuesday, so go ahead and check it out then. But you know, I despite the editing, despite the having to record sometimes for an hour, 2 hours a day, to go ahead and get everything set, to get, especially towards the end, 2 to 3 hours a day. This has actually been a lot of fun, and I have enjoyed this little project. I will definitely keep playing this in my off time, especially now that I'm basically, like I said, fortunately at this point, I'm basically just in the writing portion of the reviews I have to do, so I actually have nothing I'm playing currently. So I can pick this up and actually keep playing it on my own. Especially until Cyber Dimension gets here, which will be the next major game I'll be, playing. I don't know if I'll be doing anything for the site. I can't say anything about that for now because I have nothing planned. I do have something I do want to do, but that's neither here nor there, but it does not include Cyber Dimension at this point. However, yeah, like I said, I'm curious about basically picking this up and playing it. Before this, the only other major experience I had with a DRPG was Demon Gaze, and I couldn't beat Demon Gaze, but I really liked that game. It was a lot of fun, and why this is certainly different, and I think both do different things a little bit well. Like for example, Demon Gaze, it's been a while, but if I remember correctly, the mapping system was a little bit better in that aspect than here. But I think there was definitely a lot more versatility with the battle system here. Like I said, it's a little, they're different. They're similar in some ways and different in others, but it's right up there. And from what I remember of Demon Gaze, and I'm actually really kind of, this has been an interesting. This was one that when they announced it last fall, I was surprised we were even getting the game, and to now see it out in our hands about a year later. About, I think, almost 10 months later or so, because I think that event was in either end of October or November. So basically, 10, 11 months later, as a whole, I think IFI did a good job. There are a couple of localization issues here, like we saw. A couple of labels are just not in the right place. Like we saw with the 12. I think it was the 12-second dash, where it basically was like, oh, shrink items. What? And I'm like, wait, that's from Thumbelina's thing. It doesn't make any sense. Or then we had like last episode where we started talking about something about Cinderella and we hadn't technically met her yet. It's like, huh? And those are things I'm going to certainly notice, and I'm going to poke at them because I'm an editor by nature, so I do notice little things like that. But as a whole, it's a good game, and the localization's great. I like the voice. One of the things we didn't touch on really was the voice acting. I do like the English cast. That's why I've used the English cast this entire time. I think it's a good, if it was really bad, I would have switched it over to the Japanese, but no, I enjoyed the English voice actors. They did a good job. Kaguya's is the only one I find a little bit odd in the aspect that she almost sounds a bit posh, almost British, and I know EU viewers are like, that's not British at all, you stupid American, which is, like I said, to me, it's just basically, it definitely sounds foreign to me, which is a little bit odd, but then I guess they're trying to get that idea of her being kind of foreign across, That's still when I go, that's a bit of an odd choice, but I kind of see why, but it still works for the character, too. Especially her being kind of soft-spoken in it sometimes. But yeah, as a whole, if I had to give a recommendation, I'd say give it a shot. Definitely, like I said, look at reviews as a whole, because that way you have, like I said, we're only up to Chapter 3 here. That's as far as we're going. And I realize that's not the entire game, but I think if you combine a couple of reviews with looking over these videos to take a look and see what works and what doesn't for you, you can make an informed decision. And that, at the end of the day, that's the major goal. Whether or not this game is right for you, because this game might be right for me, but maybe it's not right for you. Maybe maybe you like this. Maybe this will say, hey, I like the idea of this game, of a dungeon RPG, but this dungeon RPG isn't for me, and you can go look for other ones. IFI does have Make You, Labyrinth of Death, which is, I think that's the name of the correct name of that, which is another dungeon DRPG. Take a look at that, maybe. Take a look maybe at Trillion, which is not quite dungeon RPG, but there are some elements from that in here. So especially, like I said, with the real-time battles, with the giant nightmare fight, whatnot, etc., you can tell there's a lot of Trillion's influence kind of in that aspect. And I haven't played a ton of Trillion, but I played a little bit of it. Same with Make You, I played a little bit of that. I did a small stream of that. But there are other ones like the Demon Gaze, there's another DRPG, and the second one of that's going to be coming out soon. But like I said, the idea is hopefully you have enough information now to make a decision for yourself, and that's at the end of the day my goal. So if you do pick it up, great. Make sure tell IFI, hey, thanks for the game, whatnot. And if you have any feedback for them, developers always want feedback because they want to know what works, what doesn't, and why something works for you or why it doesn't work. The key thing, though, everyone, is please make sure to be polite about it and be constructive. Keep in mind that I understand that, it's very easy, especially in the internet age, to kind of go, like, oh, I hate this or this sucks, whatnot, etc. But when you kind of, nobody likes, likes a jerk. And, you have to keep in mind that you think, oh, you're talking to the company, there is still that poor person who has to read all of those tweets or, messages on social media or those emails. And it's not their fault that, something's up with the game. They're just the poor person who basically has to sit there, their job is to read all of that. And like, well, that's what they get paid for. That's their job. It's like, yeah, but you don't have to be mean to that person. You could be upset about something and be constructive about it. That's the key thing. As as noted through this entire thing, there were things here and there I liked and I didn't like. And hopefully I presented them in a constructive way that, not only explains kind of why I think these things work or why they don't think they work, but they get the point across that, hey, I think things could be better. Even if something was, trust me, if something was absolutely horrible out of this game or if something really bothered me, I'm not going to pull my punches. Good case in point, and it's not a bad game, but there were some issues I had personally with the Hakuoki localization. One point there was a translation I thought was really kind of odd, and I reached out to IFI, told them, and I got a response, and it's in the review there, so you can go take a look at our Hakuoki Kyoto Winds review, and towards the end there, I basically talk about that. But you know, I'm not gonna, just because of the fact that, you know, I want to be polite and nice doesn't mean I'm gonna pull my punches. If something's wrong, I'll point out, hey, something's wrong. But at the same time, I'm also not gonna be a jerk about it. And I think at the end of the day, that is important. Definitely always give feedback, always be constructive about it, because game developers love that, and they need that. They need that kind of, they need to know what kind of works, because they might get good review scores, but don't know why they got good review scores, or get bad review scores and not know why they got bad review scores. They need that information, not just from us as reviewers, but from you as also fans. So be sure and give them that feedback, and let them know, hey, this was great, and this aspect was great, or could you maybe improve this next time? That does help them out. But at this point, we're kind of getting a bit off topic, and according to my recording here, I have been going on for about an hour and a half. I don't know how much is going to be edited down, because I got to cut out some stuff and whatnot, especially trying to get the Hunger Roulette to pop up. But anyway, long and short, like I said, my final thoughts. I think this is a good game. I'm definitely very, despite the fact that obviously, yes, they gave me a code to go ahead and take a look at this. I still bought my own copy of the collector's edition, and I'm still more than happy that I did. You know, that was well worth it. If you can get if you're really interested in a lot of the backstory stuff, especially, maybe consider picking up that LE, because of the fact that it does have that little novel book in there that'll give you a little more information on the background of the game world, whatnot, etc. But even if you just want to pick up a regular copy of the game on Amazon, you know, that's not bad. And I'd have to imagine, if you don't have a Vita, it's probably coming to Steam, knowing IFI. The only reason I could imagine it might not is this is a collaboration with a couple of different companies. Dengeki, darn it, I am blanking on name, but one of them is a PlayStation kind of a brand. I mean, heck, it says it in the intro. Maybe there's some kind of weird snafu there, but I would hope it would come to Steam, because this, you know, this would get to a wider audience then. You know, it'd be good in that aspect. But yeah, like I said, if you're interested in it, give it a shot. See how it is. You know, no, like I said, I think it's worth it. But like I said, those are my thoughts. Anyway, though, like I said, that'll do it for this episode, this series. Once again, I want to thank Idea Factory International, and especially Ari, for coordinating with me through this entire, you know, project. You know, I know they've been busy getting ready for this thing, and I've been basically bombarding you with emails, you know, going like, oh, here's this link up, and here's this question, whatnot, etc. Thank you very much, guys, for all of the help and for allowing us to do this. Thank you, obviously, to Operation Rainfall for allowing me to go ahead and do this, because, you know, it's always kind of a fun thing to get to do something cool like this. Yes, I know, despite the fact that I'm usually on this YouTube channel, I am not Operation Rainfall myself. There is an organization there as a whole. I am just the guy in charge of visual novels. So, and this is technically not a visual novel, but like I said, I was able to go, I had the equipment set up, whatnot, etc. So I figured, why not? Let's go ahead and do this. You know, so thank you for allowing me to do that in that aspect. Thank you, Idea Factory Japan, obviously, and all the developers for making this game and putting the effort you did into it. And of course, that also goes to IFI for localizing it and, you know, the hard work they put into it. Thank you to you, the viewers yourselves, for basically tuning into this, especially if you watched the entire thing. If not, pick up the game, and if you need a guide, it's here. Otherwise, you know, hey, maybe we'll have something else for you in the future. But as for the future itself, I do have a couple other maybe video ideas I'd like to do. Maybe another series in a bit, though if I do, that's going to be probably more of a long-term project. It would be more of a weekly thing, as opposed to a daily thing, just because of the fact that I will say, like, this was a lot of fun, but also this was a lot of work too. Especially when I've got reviews, I got VNs to play and reviews to write and whatnot, etc. So if we do something like this again, I think I'll probably do these as 30-minute episodes instead of the hour episodes. But for what I kind of been thinking of maybe doing in a couple of weeks here, once I kind of things settle down, I get caught up on my workload again, it's probably going to be a weekly, and that would mean to be about an hour each week or so. But we'll see how it goes. But anyway, that'll pretty much do it. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks to IFI. Thanks to Rainfall. I've been Ikario, and... それじゃあまた会いましょう。